There are few games in the modern era with a reputation like Dark Souls. From a relatively unknown developer in 2011, From Software released a game that would not only become a huge financial success, selling over 2 million copies within its first 2 years, but would go on to inspire a new generation of developers. One only needs to look at the number of games with the Steam tag Souls-like to see the impact of FromSoft's middle shelf IP. You know you've made something incredible when an entire subgenre is named after your game. And now with the release of Elden Ring, which is on track to be the most critically and commercially successful game in From Software's history, it's safe to say that this isn't the same middle shelf developer from over a decade ago. In fact, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that From Software is one of the highest quality developers in the modern AAA space. And I never played any of these games. Alright, so this is the part where I should place my cards on the table and admit that I wrote off FromSoft's games as just stuff that's not for me. My experience with Dark Souls was probably like a lot of people back in the 2010s. Which is to say... And the less said about invasions, the better. So at that point, I gave up on the series and everything that this developer ever touched. I didn't think these were bad games, they just weren't for me. But when I heard more about these games, in terms of its story, themes, and atmosphere, it was totally sounding like a game that was for me. I love stories of battered, abused people being miserable, narratives focused on the horror of human existence and the inevitable decay of all that is beautiful and decent. And since you just asked, no, I don't have a problem. So after hearing so much endless praise being heaped onto this game that I had completely written off as something that I don't get, I decided to once more try again to get it. And the verdict? It's good. It's pretty good. It's fun. We'll get into it. Just wanted to give this little preamble for what I plan to be an analysis of Dark Souls through the lens of a complete noob. If that sounds interesting, stick around as we dive into Dark Souls 1, 10 years later. We start with an opening cutscene that gives us a brief history of the world, the events leading up to the present day, and an introduction to the major players, i.e. people that will murder. It's bombastic, grandiose, and... I hate using this industry buzzword term, but... immersive. Like this is a legend or child's fairy tale that the people of Lordran tell each other. Anyways... the big takeaways from the opening are that there was a war between the ancient dragons and what the story calls the Lords, essentially demigods. The Lords won, and thus began the Age of Fire. But, like any great party, there is the inevitable come down and after-party hangover. The Age of Fire is ending, and a curse of undeath is sweeping across the land. And what little people that remain fear for the ending of the current age, because with the end of fire, comes the darkness. Whatever that means. The focus then shifts down to a much smaller level, to an old prison where a bunch of undead are housed. I guess that's how people here deal with mass plagues of undeath. Lock it away and pretend it doesn't exist. Like me, whenever I put off cleaning my bathroom. You, as in the ugly dolt you made in the character creation screen, is also in this prison, and is significantly uglier. But as you're buckling down for your morning cry, a kindly armored fellow drops a corpse into your cell. A corpse that just so happens to have a key. Now having been freed, and with nothing else on your agenda, you decide to go on a good old-fashioned prison break. This begins the tutorial segment of the game, which are a couple messages left by the developers explaining the basic controls, and that's it. There's no explanation of the stamina system, equipment durability, poise, physical and elemental resistance, status effect buildup, equipment scaling with stats, etc, etc, etc. There's commitment to minimalist game design, and then there's just laziness. But whatever. I guess if anyone's interested in that dumb nerd crap, that's what the internet's for. In all seriousness, Dark Souls' way of teaching the mechanics of the game is through trial and error. Death comes very easily, and with the loss of all your accumulated souls. You get souls every time you kill something, and these souls are used to level up, as well as an in-game currency. When you die, you drop all the souls you haven't spent, but there's always the opportunity to recollect them. If you die before picking them up, they're gone forever. Assuming you don't quit out of sheer rage. Can't think of anyone who would do that. This can be used as a good way to teach players about the game's mechanics, because while death comes easily, you can always get back to the point where your progress was halted. Anyways, back to the game. After you've slaughtered your way through the kindergarten equivalent of the undead, you come upon a courtyard and your very first bonfire. Once lit, these serve as checkpoints, replenishing your health and your Estus flasks. You also get your first big reality check, as the next helpful developer message tells you to run away when a giant demon drops in with a club to give your undead ass a spanking. Once you're done soiling yourself, you'll run from the ugly cousin of the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, murder more kindergartners, gather the rest of your gear, find a message that tells you how to do the kick that you ignore for way too long, and then you find the friendly man who freed you. Except he's dying, but he's undead, so he just come back to life. Except shut up! The real reason he's broken up is that he's going hollow, which is what happens when an undead loses hope, falls into despair, and turns into a mindless monster that attacks everything it sees. You know, like an actual zombie. This guy, who's called Oscar, but you only know that through item descriptions, then asks you to make a pilgrimage to Lordran to fulfill some ancient prophecy involving an undead, which you can't refuse because your character can't speak unless the mystical yes-no text boxes pop up. After mutely agreeing, Friendly Guy gives you some Estus flasks, an undead favorite. This is your main source of healing, but they've always looked like cheap gin to me, so I guess they serve the same function. After leaving Friendly Man, he does what he probably thinks is the honorable thing to do, ending his own life to avoid hurting an innocent person when he turns into a monster. I guess he forgot about the whole undead thing. So, this is as good a time as any to touch upon how Dark Souls structures its narrative, because it does have one. It's just that there are multiple levels. The first layer is the basic plot. You are an undead in a slowly dying world, making a pilgrimage to Lordran as part of some prophecy. Once there, you go on an odyssey that spans the highest peaks to the very center of the earth. You meet a vast array of characters whose journeys intersect or sometimes oppose your own, and it all culminates in an ending that is both fitting and engaging with the dark, oppressive atmosphere of this brutal yet alluring world. And if that's the furthest that you go down this game's rabbit hole, then it's compelling enough. However, there is another layer beneath the surface where events are playing out behind the scenes. You can find hints of this through context clues, environmental storytelling, specific NPC dialogues that are hard to find. The point is that this second layer is never explicitly told to you, and the basic story works without it. But uncovering this for yourself is so incredibly satisfying and enhances the base narrative. And beneath that layer is another one that touches up on the world building and the lore. This is mostly communicated through item descriptions, which I admit do end up painting a picture of an interesting world, but I found these to be the least engaging. Story in games told through item descriptions to me is only a few steps above an in-game glossary. In my mind, it's preferable to weave exposition into the narrative, not grind the pacing to a halt to read the Encyclopedia Britannica. But by the same token, these are just background details that aren't pivotal to the main story, so it's fine. It's nowhere near the level of Final Fantasy XIII, where you can read its in-game glossary and still have no idea what's going on in the story. Anyways, after all that boring nerd crap, it's time for payback against the Sugar Puff monster, where you get to do a plunging attack in one of the very few instances when it's useful. What follows is your first introduction to boss fights, which in contrast to combat with normal enemies, are a chaotic affair. Boss fights are one of the few times in the game where there'll be music, adding an extra layer of excitement, and helping each encounter to stand out. This is also where you learn the most valuable tip against enemies the size of a dump truck. Stick to the ass. Most large enemies can't hit you from behind without heavily telegraphing their attacks. Trust me, this works 90% of the time. At least in Dark Souls 1. With the prison warden dead, you're free to leave the asylum, because that's exactly how rehabilitation works. However, your freedom is short-lived when a raven comes out of nowhere and carries you off to an unknown destination. But it's okay. Hopefully it's where you're supposed to be going, and not into a baby bird's stomach. Hey, thank you so much for watching my video. I'm Synn. You can find me over at Twitch at SynnCobra, where I play a bunch of Souls games on... Oh, I'm gonna get killed here. I'm gonna get killed by skeleton. I didn't get killed by the skeletons. I got killed by fall damage. That's entirely different. Let's call it semi-professional skill level. If you like the video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. Leave a comment if there's anything you think that I missed, or your own thoughts on Dark Souls, and I'll try to get the next one out, I'm thinking on a weekly basis, but don't hold me to that. I do want to get more stuff out about Dark Souls, because I have a couple of things to say about it. I really like it, and it just feels nice to actually get into this game that I've spent so much time thinking was completely impenetrable to me. I'm gonna go ahead and stop now before I keep rambling. See y'all later. Bye.